Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jae-hoo Young, the president-elect of Tae University. I'm preparing for establishing a new university, which will be a kind of new model of university in the 21st century. It will be the most innovative university. The effective education of the university will produce the most talented graduate in the world. Today, I'm honored to have Professor Koslin, a worldly renowned authority on cognitive psychology at Harvard University and an active learning consultant. Tae University is very pleased to have Professor Koslin to sign an agreement for designing a learning model last Monday. We will cooperate closely to launch a future model of university in the 21st century. Tae University is a future-oriented online university that aims to nurture global management talent, future management talent, and self-directed talent through active learning and global projects. Aiming for a top-notch university in the 21st century, we want to create the world's most advanced education system together with Professor Koslin. It is a really good opportunity to hear his ideas of active learning in this forum organized by Tae University. It is my honor and pleasure to preside the discussion session of the forum. We have two panels on top of Professor Koslin, Professor Milian of Hanyang University. She is an expert on education technology. Another panel is Professor Jung-eun Kim. She is a professor of education in Arizona State University. You know that the most innovative university in the world. Okay, let's start. Let me ask the first question to Professor Koslin. Why do you believe that we Korean universities need to change the traditional education method to a new way? And what is the benefit of advantage of your active learning method for educating our students?
So I'm hardly an expert on Korean educational systems, so I need to be a little careful about that. But what I can say in general, there's too much emphasis on memorization, on just learning for the sake of learning, take a test, do well on test. There's not been enough emphasis on how one will actually use that information. So in particular, often what happens is what you learn in class stays in class. There's a problem called transfer. It doesn't happen. People don't use what they learn in class in the world. The traditional methods result in that. Active learning, if done properly, can result in not only learning information effectively, but also being able to use it.
So the useless knowledge and information is not enough, and you just emphasize using the knowledge and information in the real world.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it.
For the good of both the individual and society.
Good. Okay. Then I just switch questions to our panelists. Professor Am, could you ask something?
Stephen, we enjoyed your speech, and through your speech, I think we have listened and actually enlightened in a way that you presented a way to achieve active learning, or the purpose of active learning is to engage students in the process of learning, which will, that we hope that they will learn, right? At the end, their output is to learn and be able to use that knowledge. However, we are concerned about some of the issues that in order to have students learn, we need a very well-structured and maybe even standardized curriculum in very detailed and specific, so that the students can lead or maybe mapped in a way to learn. But this will also kind of is a dilemma for some people as to what about the student autonomy? So how can TED balance this guaranteeing or the best experience of student autonomy and yet have a system that supports and that is very well structured?
That's an extremely good question. So What should be standardized, in my view, are the learning objectives. In the early years, the active learning exercises that are designed to help the students achieve the learning objectives should be very well structured. But as they go along in later years, you can give them more and more choice about what kinds of activities to do to address those learning objectives. This is particularly effective in experiential learning. So what they'll be doing in the cities and other countries. You can structure it in a way that they understand the goals, but they have a lot of autonomy in how to achieve those goals.
So that's why you are suggesting to have a global campus experiential learning at maybe the second year and on. So in the first year, they will be learning and they will be guided with a strong foundation. And then they will be actually going to global campus to experience and their learning.
That's exactly right. So I think of it in terms of scaffolding. You give them, just what you said, a solid foundation, and once they have that, then you can let them choose more and they'll do well.
I think some Korean parents might like that because they want to have their children or their son and daughters to be controlled in some way, or someone is managing their time. But I think then again, it's their freedom of choice of many, courses or major areas, or maybe some other activities.
Mm-hmm. Right, I agree.
Okay.
Okay, great. And now turn to Professor Kim. Yeah.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for your presentation today. As Professor An mentioned, I think it was really delightful and provided all the audience in terms of how we see teaching and learning that are happening in the classrooms like all over the world. So I want to kind of take us back to the discussion of active learning. And one of the things that I really appreciated in your presentation was providing some of the examples, like what kind of activities can be applied to the active learning. So, my questions, I guess it will consist of two parts. One, can you give us more solid example of what the processes look like to implement active learning in a classroom? And I saved the second part of the question for after our conversation.
That's a very good question. So I think it's important to distinguish between the information transmission, content delivery part, and active learning. So you can design a class so that the information transmission has a little active learning in it, like polls and quizzes and things like that. But most of the active learning is going to take part in small breakout groups, in small groups. So that the groups are designed so that the students participating in them can not only work on a project, creating a work project, that addresses the learning objective, but in doing that, they bond. And in fact, that bonding, the social part, is a really important part of learning. So that the mere act of working together to achieve a common goal does a lot in terms of furthering your education.
Yeah, thanks for the answer. So the second part is, the idea that you just conveyed, I'm individually, kind of envisioning okay, how can I incorporate that in my own teaching process, right? But at the same time, one of the things I think that a lot of institutions faced was during COVID-19, you have to move your teaching and learning to online, which is kind of similar setting to what Taeje University will be having. So the next question is, how do you envision implementing active learning in the classrooms that are happening online, such as the ones that are happening at Taeje University?
Right. So again, this distinction between the information transmission, that is the lecture part, and breakout groups, really important. So the first part, you can have recordings, as you're planning on doing, of the content, or use other people's recordings, as you also talked about, framed in a way where they can understand what the learning objectives are, so they know why they're listening to this, what the purpose is. And then after they get some content, they go into groups in breakout rooms, so you can do this in Zoom very easily. And in fact, Zoom allows you to use spreadsheets to specify which students go in which rooms, so you can use various kinds of data about the students to help have very effective and efficient breakout room groups. And they can then address the activity that's been designed to help them achieve the learning objective. So I think you can use something like Canvas, a learning management system, to store the information you need to specify both the lecture content delivery parts and also the instructions and things that help the students produce the work product in the breakout groups. And you can use Zoom to actually do the synchronous online part. And the two can work quite well in tandem.
I asked a question about the whole system. You talked about very specific and detailed structure. The system is important. And then what Professor Kim asked you and your answers revealed that I think Taizé University will actually work on the design of the course, maybe spending more than 50% of their energy in preparing these lessons and learning objectives.
Yeah, I think learning objectives is the absolute key. There are many ways to do it, and we probably won't get it right the first time. So we have to have an open attitude that we collect data on how well things are working and be willing to revise, because not everything's going to work as well as it could. So that's at multiple levels. Sometimes the active learning activities won't be as effective as need be. Sometimes the learning objectives might not be what you really want. So you have to be willing to take a big picture perspective, keep in mind the overall goals, and then adjust as data comes in.
Last 2 years, we've been in the COVID mode, and we all experienced online learning. And somehow the teachers and all the students have experienced the good part of online learning, but also some disadvantage or maybe bad habits of online learning. And I think the Taizé universities and you, with your consulting, I think it's going to be very different. It's going to be an innovative approach to online learning and hybrid learning. And my question is, you know, the higher education will have to embrace this online learning from now on in one form or another, as you said, hybrid learning part. Now, Taizé embraced the campusless. We will have no campus like traditional universities. And how can you and how can Taizé guarantee a good education, good higher education without campus? And can you give some of your suggestions that Taizé students will get out of Taizé without campus?
So there are many different functions of education. Some are social, where it is important to interact personally, but the educational part, I don't think depends on interacting personally. I think the content transmission can be done via recordings or live lectures, and you can watch on a screen. As long as you have an opportunity to ask questions, it's not so bad. And then the active learning can actually be better online. It can actually be better. And the reason for that is it's very easy. Push of a button to create breakout rooms. You can use data to put people in groups depending on what it is the activity is about and what they're good at and what they're interested in. You can collect data that'll improve it going forward. You can make it very easy to share documents and create joint work products and other sorts of things that are very easy to do online that are more difficult to do in person. It's interesting. So if you do it right, where the students interact online, they actually like it. So Foundry College, which we mentioned earlier, has extremely good results. There's something called a Net Promoter Score, which is a measure of how much students like it, and it's over 60 for the last 2 years, I think. Very, very high. So that's evidence that this can be very, very effective if you do it right.
Okay, let me interrupt a little bit. And over and over again, I just Professor Koslin emphasized, usually we professors design a course just a teaching based on the teaching objectives, but he just emphasized the learning objectives. It is from the perspective of students, what they can learn, what they should learn. Professors should just to think about in advance and organize the syllabus in advance based on the individual students' just a capacity and some kind of a motivation and all that kind of things. How to achieve the students' learning is more important than teachers' teaching objectives. So it is a quite different one. And also, he emphasized that in the offline campuses, it is very difficult to divide the students to just form a group and discuss in a class. But in this kind of online just a system, LMS, they can easily divide it up at the different places and form a group and discuss a lot of things and just convene again and just evaluate professors, their discussions or something like that. Or sometimes professors can jump into the discussions among the different groups or something like this. So it may be some kind of a new, just a way of teaching and learning in the 21st century. So in that sense, it has good advantage of online education. He's emphasizing that. Yeah, I understand.
Exactly.
I agree.
So what President Yum said and what Stephen says is that the data that it enabled by the system to collect, that will be analyzed to actually customize students' individual and their maybe adaptive learning part of with the system. So that makes online learning even more effective and more doable and possible.
Absolutely right.
I'm convinced.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Sure.
First,
Yeah. As we are getting convinced, right? I think we are living in a time where people question about the value of higher education. Why do we need to go to college? Why do we need to get a bachelor's or higher degrees, right? So one of the questions I have to you is, how would you define collegiate or student outcomes?
So it comes back to learning objectives. So you remember that list all the way from the vision and mission of the institution to the competencies of programs and so forth going down. There are learning objectives associated with each. So depending on what the learning objectives are, you measure different things. So you measure it. So they're different. When I said they're futures of higher education, depending on the learning objectives, very different institutions. So there's an opportunity for a unique niche right now for TIJI to think about people who are comfortable internationally and can lead in an international context and lead at multiple levels, including being managers to provide support. It's part of a team that's actually leading. So that's a niche that I'm not sure anybody else is in. So if that is the institutional level goal, then you want to measure both the specific learning objectives that feed into that. You can measure various competencies involving leadership and so forth. But also, wouldn't it be interesting to follow them up for 5 years after they graduate and see how well they're doing in the real world? Get feedback from the employers. Why not?
So that's the part where my second question comes in, which can be a little harder than the first question. So, to my knowledge, you've been involving in a lot of projects that are dreaming the futures, plural, of higher education. And I know probably by this time there has been some evidence of what's happening to the students who went through that innovative process. Right. So how do you evaluate the success of some of those experiments or innovative attempts in terms of achieving the student outcomes?
So Foundry College, for example, was set up for working adults. And the goal there was to teach them, help them learn, skills and knowledge that would not easily be automated. These were working adults. We didn't want them to lose their jobs. So we taught them some basic human skills, and then they would get a third-party job credential, like entry-level Salesforce administrator or project administrator or so on. And then they got jobs. They actually got jobs. So that, the real world.
Yeah, probably in that sense, we have a very big vision to make them as world leaders in various ways, but it will take time to just find out their outcomes. But from his point of view, I understand that the kind of learning capacity, and also not only learning, but he just mentioned the human skills, that is communication, interaction, understand others, and empathy, and all these kind of things are well developed in the just the foundational, just competency courses. So as Professor An just raises, that is a very serious question that we have in mind, that is the autonomy or totally just a well-designed system is a very serious problem. So for the first year, because Korean just high school graduate, they are not trained in that kind of critical thinking or creative thinking or communication and that kind of thing. So we are going to design very nicely and just a scaffolding or something like that. You just mentioned that. And then we train it very harshly in the first year. And then in the first semester of the second year, they take the two different second language, foreign languages, and also the Python, the computer languages, a tightly, just a well-designed one. And we are going to send them to foreign countries, 4 different countries. But during the summer vacations, around 8 weeks or just 2 months, we're going to provide some kind of well-designed RC program. But after that, in the just traveling around different cities, they will have their own, just like autonomy to delve into some problems, social problems in the cities and the country or something like that. So we like to balancing the well-prepared, designed programs mixed with their own very creative problem solving, just learning. So it is something like he emphasized that using the knowledges. Is it right?
Yeah. But you know, I'm reminded there was a book by a French philosopher named Jean-Paul Sartre called Being and Nothingness, which I had to read as an undergraduate. There was one image that really stuck in my mind. So the book is about freedom. And someone said to Sartre, we're not totally free. We can't walk through walls, and so forth. And Sartre said, you remind me of a pigeon. The pigeon is flying along, and it's thinking to itself, oh, if it only wasn't for this air, I could go so much faster. The air holding it back. But the fact is, it couldn't actually fly without the air. So Sartre's point was, without structure, you don't actually have freedom. You need to have well-defined choices to be able to choose. So similarly, I would suggest that for the experiential programs, you're right, they need to have choice. But the choice should be structured. It should be learning objectives that tie in with what they've learned in class, so they can see how what they learned in class can be used in the real world, and vice versa, so that they can understand how to bring back what they've learned in the real world into their knowledge from class. So it becomes more than just one or the other. So some structure is a very good idea, but also some choice.
Yeah, just like in the sky, just monitoring, just a bird eyes view, and students are wandering around in the street or something, but well structured, well guided one. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, go ahead.
I have another question. It's from Professor Bae Sang-hoon, who is in Jeju Island right now. He's one of our preparation committee member, and he wanted to be here and meet with you to ask this question, but he had to be leading the student activity in Jeju Island. So here it comes. His question is, from your previous experiences of I know, we all know that you are the first dean of Minerva University, and you are the founder of the Foundry College, online college. So what do you regret, if any, and what would you do differently with TEJE? And so to become the world's top university, what would you suggest TEJE to do differently?
So the one thing I think could have been emphasized more was what it takes to lead a full life. So the human aspect of how to function well in society and be a comfortable, productive human being. So I think there could have been more focus on that sort of thing. And I think part of the way to achieve that is by thinking about how to integrate the experiential part with the classroom part better. So I think that is a real use of experiential because it involves humans in context in a way that can help you mature and develop your perspectives and insights to grow as a person.
So you're suggesting that integration of the experiential learning with classroom learning, that we can enhance their whole humanity,
Yeah.
and that also will help them to grow as,
Yes.
as a vision for TEJE University. Do you see that maybe you missed that, or that was not integrated well?
It wasn't done as well as it could have been, perhaps. I mean,
see.
it's hard, and the focus was on some other things, so it was understandable. I mean, I think the key is, again, things iterate. You start with the best you can, and then you get data, feedback, and you improve. And you have to keep that attitude of continually growing, changing, adapting. The world changes around you. It doesn't stay the same. So even if it worked really well now, it may not work well next year. So that attitude is really, really important. So the other efforts that I'm involved in, I thought were quite good for what they did at the time to begin with. But in terms of my looking back now, you asked what I regret, I probably would have thought more about that than I did at the time.
So you can just suggest the more improved way, how to, especially for TEJE students, and you are just applying the better methods. Yeah, that's good. And it is a very new, innovative idea, just having just applying active learning in the class, especially the online classes, and then after that, just they experience some kind of, and challenged by some kind of real complex social problems and solve it by themselves with the assistance of the professors, guidance. So it is quite a balanced, dual approach of the tightly structured one that you mentioned, that scaffolded, in that way. So it is a kind of a new educational method in the 21st century, because in most big universities now they're focusing on the research. So they don't just count on and they consider undergraduate students seriously. They simply teach. That's it.
Right.
So it is a very serious problem, but you designed, one is actual learning in the class, by way of online, and then in the sort of ground or outside, and experience and utilize their human skills, and then their major courses, informations into the problem solving in the actual scene.
Right. So notice what you're doing. You're using learning objectives. So you have implicit, very well defined, problem solving, social problems, and so forth. So by making those explicit for the students, so they understand why they're doing what they're doing, what they're supposed to achieve, better for them, better for us, better for society.
TEJE University has three, in that sense, a little bit broad, higher level of the learning objectives. One is, as I said before, we have to train them as some kind of global management talent, not only the local or national level. Probably after 20 or 30 years later, from now on, our students can work all over the world. Probably they cannot stay in Seoul or Korea less than 6 months in a year. So they should consider world issues and global issues. So they have to manage global issues. That is one our learning objectives. The other one is it is related to the future management talent, not just a backward or past experience and that kind of things. So they have to solve the future issues, not traditional one. And the third one is, especially as you mentioned, that in Korean cases, rote memorization and tightly controlled and the right answer, that is the common knowledge accumulation for Korean students. But from now on, they're going to live more than 100 years. So they have to develop their own just capacity and competence by themselves. They have to learn and learn over and over again. So that is the reason why we emphasize the self-directed talent. So you emphasize the learning goal, learning objectives, and our learning objectives for our student success. That is, global management and future management and the self-directed capacity. That is a major thing that my university wants to just raise our children.
So I didn't list that human skill. Learning to learn.
Yeah, right.
That should have been on my list.
Yeah, right.
That is an essential human skill.
Yeah.
But I think it's very clear, listening to you, why there's a really good match between TJ and active learning sciences.
Sure. In order to achieve this kind of talent, surely we need some kind of, we just design the 6 competence of the students. That is critical thinking, creative thinking, communication, and interaction, and also global mind, and some kind of diversity or something like this. So those 6 competence, we designed our first year general education or foundational education courses. So probably that is some kind of fundamental groundwork for the human skills, right?
That's right. Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to underscore that, like, on top of just, doing the work and, like improving teaching and learning, bringing active learning, you try to improve using data. It's not just making decision based off of, like, I feel just making the decision, which I want to emphasize as someone who does higher education research. So that was sort of like, my impression. So, I'm way older than the age where I consider as a high schooler to choose, okay, which university do I want to go and study, right? But I was trying to kind of put myself into the shoe and as the question of, if there are probably a lot of prospective students who wants to come and study at Teje, so what kind of quality do you expect them to have as a student who wants to come and enjoy the experience?
It's not my decision to do this, but if you ask my advice, you want people who have a kind of international interest, frame of mind, who have leadership aptitude and interested in being leaders, who are independent-minded, and not just mind, but also independent so they can function by themselves in different kinds of environment. They should be quite smart, of course. They should be very open and flexible, and they should have a frame of mind that leads them to want to try something really new and be part of something really new.
Yeah, thank you very much. And it is a very good opportunity for us to have Professor Koslin, the leading cognitive psychologist and a good educator. And from now on, the Teje University is quite different from the traditional universities. So our teaching method is different, and usually one interesting item is that we train and teach professors before they're doing their instruction. In most cases, traditional universities, professors are doing by themselves to teach. But here, it is well organized and well trained, and Professor Koslin and his team will train the professors at least a month in advance, and then every year we will have 2 weeks, just a workshop for training, and the Education Innovation Center will monitor all the courses, and that is recorded, and then evaluate and just improve for the next year. So the professors, every 3 years, they should recontract and something like that. So it is not not like the traditional university, totally different university, and also it is only good for the student success. So it is just starting, and Professor Koslin already interviewed and make around 10 small clips, video clips of YouTube, and you're gonna just consider that one later. And then I myself, from July or August, just provide more specific information related to scholarship and the global project and dormitory RC programs and all those kind of things, and the consulting, counseling, and leadership program. And I'm going to make some YouTube clips from now on. So please, just look at those clips, and then I hope a lot of good, talented students apply for Taizé University, and then we hope we're going to change the atmosphere of the Korean universities education in the 21st century and the future. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you for,
You were going to give us a wrap up. Can I just wrap up?
Wrap
summarize?
up. Yeah, sure,
Okay.
Go ahead.
I think what I heard and what I have researched, the Taizé University is very purposefully, intentionally designed classes, courses, programs. So I feel like it's going to be designed and analyzed purposefully and intentionally with not only Dr. Koslin, but also a full staff from the Taizé University. So it seems like it's going to be an innovative university, and I think many people will be very excited. And Taizé is willing to share many of those pedagogy they develop in the future.
Sure. I'll just reiterate what Professor An mentioned. As someone who went through the higher education, I'm a product of previous higher education system in Korea, and now I'm looking at the Korean higher education system from outside. So this type of innovative attempts are really exciting for me as someone who studies higher education. And it's kind of nice to see that the direction is going for the student-driven, outcome-driven, individualized learning, and also data-driven. So yeah, I think it's very exciting to see that, and looking forward to see in 5 years where the students are, what they say about the experience, and etc.
Good. Very good. Thanks again, Professor Koslin. It is a long trip from United States under this kind of COVID-19 pandemic situation. And with his wife, she is an expert in just what is it, the counseling and clinical psychologist, and a very famous person who wrote a lot of books. So it is a very good opportunity, and from now on, he's going to visit Korea under our contract at least twice a year, and then he's going to contribute to the big jump and innovation of Korean higher education. Thank you, all of you, and thank you for panelists and Professor.
Thank you.
Scott.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.